we go. So it's kind of that excuse me, it's that light time of year in terms of WordPress news and events. Really, the main thing. Again, we talked about some WordPress like the accessibility day, which Peter was one of the presenters there. That ended. You can always go back and look at those slides too. So you can certainly go back to some recently ended WordPress events. And view the presentations. But really, in terms of upcoming stuff, just at least worth sharing is right around the corner, WordPress 6.4 is coming up. So probably before we meet again for a November meetup. There's, to be honest, again, this is one I haven't played around with too much. I actually was looking at the WordPress. Again, if you go to wordpress.org and news, you can always see information about upcoming releases. So really, it looks like some of the big features on this is, first off, there's going to be a new default theme, the 2024 theme. So that's something you obviously will have installed. You can take a look at that a bit more. Maybe we'll explore that a bit in November. We'll see what's in that theme. But the rest of it, to be honest, I see some minor features like some Lightbox functionality finally getting added to images. You don't necessarily need a Lightbox plugin if that does kind of what you need. Some changes to patterns, some more things around keyboard shortcuts, etc. But one of the big ones that was supposed to be part of this was around this font management. So being able to import fonts locally from Google Fonts. It looks like, according to what I saw recently, that's been moved now to 6.5. So because there's more testing that needs to be done there. And also, it sounds like there's just a lot of bug fixes, those kind of enhancements in this. So again, this is something to be aware of. You'll probably, if you have sites where WordPress gets updated automatically, you shouldn't have to do anything. You'll see this coming. So November 7th, that's right around the corner. That's all I really had for news. I don't see any events really coming up in the near future. Peter, do you have a tool or a plugin spotlight?
Yeah, I do want to add one quick.
Sure.
So I put in a link to the WordPress 6.4 source of truth document that Ann McCarthy does on her blog. It's a real in-depth look at some of the stuff that they post on, and I just really appreciate it. So I wanted to share that. And the other thing is Cadence Amplify is this Friday, which is, we like Cadence, and it's another kind of free through much of the day. They've got 2 tracks going, so that should be a lot of fun. So
awesome. Thanks.
That's always informative. Yeah, let me grab the screen, and I'm going to show you something kind of neat, hopefully a little entertaining. All right. Can you see some?
The octopuses.
The octopus. Okay, so this is a multi-stage tip because it's just something I've been playing with that I really kind of like. The first thing is, so I have different ways of using artificial intelligence, and now with some advanced image creation that's available there, and a lot of it available for free. Google has something through Google Labs that I have not been able to get into yet, but Bing uses they're using the new DALL-E 3 image generator, and if you go to bing.com/images/create, you probably need to have, if you don't already, need a Bing account. I'll put the link in there. But from there, you can run. First of all, you can create pretty cool images. So this was like a cool octopus sticker graphic. I did a few others, but say you wanted to do, I'm going to do something really simple, but a simple, and this is not meant to demonstrate how you would create, for example, a logo, but just how you might go through a few steps to do something using the tools that I'm going to share with you. And so a simple logo using the letter I. Say I wanted to do something, and it's creating that. It's going through a process. You go through free tokens right now. I've been using some. I think you get 100 a day or something like that. So which is kind of cool. So it's going to generate that. Let's see if we get anything kind of interesting, because I'm just using a really simple prompt right now. A big part of artificial intelligence is using prompts very cleverly and wisely. If you use ChatGPT, for example, which is kind of a text-based thing. So how you prompt something might be a really important part of the process, and that is becoming its own skill. So say, for example, I don't know, this one. If I took that, I'm going to go now to the next step, which is it's generating this as a graphic, and there are now becoming, especially if you have the Adobe suite of tools, if you're using Adobe Photoshop, Adobe Illustrator, artificial intelligence is getting built into that. It's really kind of crazy. But right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to download this image, and let me just save it in my over here. And the reason I'm downloading it is because now I'm going to go to the next step. Now this is just a graphic, just a JPEG at this point. There's another tool that I've been using, and I use this. Say you have you have a client that has a logo, and for whatever reason, the only thing they have is a JPEG. They don't have the original artwork, and you want to do different things with it, or just for whatever you have this graphic, you say this would be much better if I could scale it to different sizes or use it as an SVG file. There's a great tool called vectorizer.ai. That's this site here. And if I just I'm going to take this thing I just created, this logo, and I'm going to drop it there. And when I do that, it's going to vectorize it. What it's doing is it's looking for all the paths. So, and here's a neat way to look at it. As I zoom in on this, you can see here's the JPEG graphic, but the vectorized image shows perfect lines because vectors are not made of pixels. They're basically mathematical, defining what curves are and things like that. So now I have created from this JPEG that I just ran now a vector image. I'm going to take this one step further. I'm going to download that vector image, and you can download it in different ways. Right now, I'm going to do a simple EPS if you happen to use that. And SVG would be something that you could bring right into WordPress if you use. I think we still need to use an SVG plugin to make sure that it cleans that image. They were talking about making it core, but I'm going to download that. And yep, I'm going to download the same place. And now I'm going to take it one step further. I don't know, a couple of years ago, we talked about this. I showed you this tool right here called Photopea. Photopea is an online Photoshop tool. So it works very, very similarly to Photoshop. It's free, it's online. Well, they just came out with VectorP. And VectorP, it's still new. They're still adding features, but now what VectorP is a vector base. Is basically, instead of Photoshop, it's Illustrator online. And if I drop what I just put there, I now have this image that all the elements are separate pieces because it's a vector. So now if you're using Illustrator, and there are other tools to do it, but that was a quick step through of going through generating an image, turning it into a vector, and bringing it into a tool where now you can edit the vector, change the colors, change the size. So there's some pretty amazing things that we could do with these. Are right now free tools. If you have like an Illustrator or the Affinity product, it's not Design or something like that, I can't remember, but some of these tools where you can do vector editing, now you can get in and get even further control. But that's a great way. This vectorizer AI tool is great for, like, I have a client that has the logo, they don't have the original artwork, I'm just going to recreate the vector, clean it up, maybe play with the colors because they're talking about modifying the colors. So some pretty great things we can now do with these free tools with artificial intelligence built in. Pretty cool.
Laura asks the $1,000,000 question: who owns the graphic that's created by Bing? I'm sure
By
there's
Bing?
fine print, the AI generated thing, or who owns
So that's a great question, and I believe Bing, and I only know this coincidentally to something that I heard today, that Google, Bing, I'm not sure if OpenAI, but they are making statements that say that whatever they generate is considered yours to use as you wish. Now, you can go back into, well, how did they get that information? That's a whole nother level. But as far as the rights to the image, These tools like Bing, it's like, no, you made it, it's yours to use. So it's pretty amazingly friendly. And yeah, this Bing tool does some pretty great stuff. This is just prompts that I put in just playing around today.
Yeah.
Um, and the new Dolly tools can use words like a lot of the artificial intelligence stuff couldn't use before. I was playing again, around with again other logo ideas and things like this. And this is all AI generated.
So two more quick comments there, Peter, from the chat.
Yeah.
One, DK asks, why are you using Vectorizer and Photopea instead of the actual Photoshop / Illustrator? I assume it's just because these are free and they're online, right?
Yeah, to demonstrate to people who don't have these that there are tools out there they can use. Vectorizer, quite honestly, and I haven't used the latest version of Illustrator to see how it does its latest tracing, but Vectorizer was doing a better job than Illustrator was for tracing, unless you went in and do a lot of things manually. I'm imagining they just had Adobe Max and they announced a whole lot of things. It's insane what we can now do with AI and photo manipulation and things like that. Some of the demonstrations will knock your socks off. So, but yeah, this is a for free tools and doing something kind of quick, down and dirty. If you don't have some of these tools, there are things out there that we can use.
Awesome.
There was a second question.
No, it's just there was a comment I think in there about just being careful of ownership too, like other people taking, like you said, taking somebody's designs and obviously trying to, nefariously, whatever, kind of reverse engineer things with them. So
yeah, that's a huge topic, and it is something being worked on and considered. It's like, oh, if you did this in the art style of a particular artist, for example, what you could do, then it's like, well, aren't you stealing that? All things to be worked out. It's not going away. It's just a matter of working out
Agreed.
the best ways to approach these things.
Cool. Very good. Thanks for sharing, Peter. All right. Let me share again. So let's see. All right. So let's kick off tonight's topic. And I'll make sure I get the latest version. This is great. No more swapping of slides. I love this. So again, like I said, if people aren't aware of it, if you go to hartfordwp.com, all of our past presentations are here. And if you want to follow along tonight, feel free. And Peter put this together. So again, tonight's topic is sort of provocatively named, moving away from page builders to the block editor. And there's gonna be a lot of caveats in this, but the reason we wanted to bring up this topic is this came up actually quite a bit during our summer school session. So for folks who aren't aware, during the summer, we basically take a break from doing slides and formal presentations. We have more of an open Q&A forum. But there were quite a few topics during the summer about people were interested in learning about the block editor and some of the things that are now built into WordPress, but they're a little hesitant to say, well, how do I get there? Like, how do I learn that? Or they're managing a site that was built in a page builder, and they're just trying to figure out some steps and guidance of how do I get from where I am, with page builders over to the block editor, and what's the difference between them? So that really sparked our idea for tonight's topic. So here's the agenda. We'll do some quick introductions to who I am and who Peter is, and then we'll talk a brief history lesson. Again, I don't claim to be the ultimate authority on this, but just a reminder, especially for new folks, what was life like before the block editor / Gutenberg, and why do we have page builders? Why were they so popular at one time, which really kind of influenced why we have Gutenberg. But then we'll talk too about just compare these two. So it's not an either or thing. We like to definitely be open. We're not selling one way or another, but what are some of the advantages of the block editor? But also, what are some advantages that page builders still have today? And then we'll talk about two different approaches for starting to explore the block editor if you're coming from a page builder. So Peter will talk about what we kind of called the hybrid approach, so having the two of them kind of live side by side. And I'll talk more about some of the ideas and techniques to rebuild something from scratch from a page builder. And again, I'll try to get as far as I can in 30 minutes-ish, but just to at least give you some things to think about. And then we'll do a wrap up, and then we'll obviously open things up for a normal Q&A. Real quick, so who am I? I'm Ray. I'm one of the organizers of Hartford WordPress. I've been in software development for 25 plus years, worked for some large companies. Been using WordPress around 7+ years-ish now. I always forget to change this, somewhere around there. So actually my time, as we talk about page builders, in most of my time with WordPress has been, the page builders have been around. I don't predate the page builders. I know there's some other people on here who do, so we'd love to hear your thoughts later. We talk about history and things like that. So I'm self-employed. I have my own web design company, married, no kids, live in Newington, Connecticut, and I am a geek. Peter.
Yeah, I'm Peter Ingersoll. I live in South Windsor, Connecticut. I've been working on the web for a long time. My focus has been marketing communications using technology to do those things. Kind of one of those go-to tech guys that, hey, can you fix my computer? To can you make a web page for me, and everything in between. Been using WordPress for more than 10 years. I am self-employed, married. I'm with 2 kids, and I am a self-proclaimed WordPress admin and DIY advocate. In fact, I'm working on a project now that is all about the DIY, supporting the DIY person, because I feel they sometimes fall between the cracks, which is actually a big part of this audience, I think.
And a great segue into some of the history. So, and again, Peter, definitely chime in here too, and others in the chat as well. So, the life before Gutenberg. So again, if you're new to WordPress, this thing that still, the name, it's one of those things, be careful when you name something, because the name sticks around much longer than people probably want it to. But this thing called Gutenberg / the block editor, it's basically that visual editor that's now built into WordPress. So when you get WordPress today, you have this experience of dragging blocks and creating pages and/or posts with that. But prior to that, there was this other thing called like the classic editor, is kind of what you would probably call it today, or Tiny MCE was another kind of name for a part of it. So websites in the past were built many different ways. I'm not saying this is the only way, but in general, if you were let's say especially a novice or an end user who somebody had built your site for you, a lot of the site will have been built primarily using this this classic editor, and that's kind of what we're showing here, and perhaps custom fields too. So let's say, for example, if someone wanted to build you a site that was semi-dynamic and it had a gallery of images, for example. Somebody, if your site was developed by somebody else or yourself, you probably would create a custom field for an image array or something like that. So that can be the way to expose some functionality to through the back end of WordPress to somebody who wants to just add a new photo, for example, or change a headline or whatever. You really have to use this combination of classic editor, custom fields, but primarily it was coding was required to do the layout of your pages. So you had to be a developer in many cases. You had to understand PHP, you had to understand HTML. So it was really difficult for non-developers to modify, which, again, some people may say that was great for us as software developers. That was, they had to pay us to change everything. But, again, this idea of democratizing websites and website development, it really was difficult for non-technical people to make changes. And that's why early page builders, again, the beginning of page builders, and I had to look it up as I was putting together this information. So Visual Composer, it's been named many different things over time. Now it's WP Bakery. It's been around since 2011. And I'm sure there are other ones before it, but that's probably the one I think most people in that time period before Gutenberg have probably encountered something like that. So, Visual Composer was quite often bundled, and still is, unfortunately, bundled with those paid themes from places like Theme Forest. I forget all the other ones out there. But, the reason for it was it allowed people to finally customize some of their layouts of their sites. It wasn't great to work with, but it's better than the alternative. It was the first attempt at letting people make changes to their pages. Peter, are you familiar with any other old ones, like besides Visual Composer? That's the one that kind of always jumps to
Yeah, in
mind.
terms of the old one, yeah, the bakery Visual Composer. I'm trying to think of the other ones. There were some that were baked into theme houses that had their own. But I can't.
It's still, what's sad is it's still in use today. So don't think,
Yeah.
it's now been modernized and all that. It looks more like a block editor, page builder.
Yep.
It's still around. It's probably not one that people talk about a lot, but I would imagine if you looked at the the numbers, it's still probably high up there in terms of usage. So, but again, so life before Gutenberg was this. It was, again, if you were non-technical, your only option was something like these sort of clunkier page builders. So now, oops, for some reason my Zoom window keeps blocking. There we go, the next button. So today we have what we call the block editor / Gutenberg. So, why tonight's talk is about moving away from page builders. Why would you do that? Why would you move to something like what is now 5 years old? So again, for folks who are new, when this Hartford WordPress group, we kind of restarted this group in 2018, it was the very beginning of Gutenberg. And I think that was the first presentation I think I did was like, what is Gutenberg? So 5 years later, it took a while to get there, but we have this thing called the block editor. So, what's the benefit of using this over something like page builders or writing code from scratch? One thing is compatibility. The components of the block editor are built into WordPress core. So that means it's not necessarily guaranteed, but highly likely, highly tested to be compatible across different themes and plugins. There's a lot of eyes and hands on the block editor. Again, not to say sometimes bugs won't creep in like they do for any software, but it's much better than having 100 people working on this thing in an open source world than some company that you never heard of, that who knows how many people are working on it and checking it. So compatibility is a big thing. Cost. Again, the block editor is free. If you have WordPress, you have the block editor. There's no annual license fees for it. It's just built into WordPress core. And then simplicity. There's a lot of pages that sometimes it's overkill to use a page builder. Quite often it is. There's a lot of pages that are just images, rows, and text. You can build those with the built-in blocks in WordPress core. And I'll talk about that later when I'm doing my demo of things that you can and can't do. But again, there's a lot of simple things you can build just entirely with the WordPress core blocks. But also it gives you flexibility. That's one thing, when you're tied into a page builder, a lot of times the only components, and Peter will talk more about some of the terminology here later, but for some page builders, what you have is what you have. And I'll show Divi a little bit later. That's been a pain point. A lot of people are upset about Divi because over the past couple of years, they haven't added much for those kind of modules, etc. So the cool thing about using a block editor is you can mix and match. You're not just stuck with WordPress core blocks. There's plenty other block packages out there, some paid, many free. So you just get a lot more design choices from using the block editor. And then just the last kind of two things I'll hit quickly. So performance, again, this may vary, but ideally the core blocks should be more lightweight because they're built into WordPress core than page builder modules. You're not really sure necessarily the coding standards behind those. And there's always continuous improvement happening to the WordPress block editor and the blocks. We've seen this a lot. Again, we talked 5 years ago, many people, myself included, were not willing to jump away from our page editor or page builders to the block editor because it wasn't ready. But in 5 years, I'm one of the converted. I think there's so much to it and so many enhancements we've seen recently that I think it's worth and it's going to continue to get better as time goes on. Peter, anything to add on why I use the block editor?
Well, I think you make a good point with the simplicity and how easily folks fall into using a page builder. You go look at a tutorial that says the first, step number 1, load Elementor. And I've seen folks load Elementor, get the premium version, and the only reason they used it was because they wanted to do something with making some headings look a little bit bigger and maybe even something as complicated as a row with some columns in it. Well, that's all available to us without any of these tools. So the overkill in loading all of that just to do something that's already in core, but honestly not knowing any better, that's where we're advocates for at least letting you know what your options are, so that the block editor offers a whole lot, but if you're not ready, you don't have to. And part of what we're going to talk about here is how you can ease into some of this.
Right. But page builders still have a place today. I'll be the first to admit that there are still situations where page builders have an advantage today. Again, this goes back to the block editor / Gutenberg is still evolving. It's gotten a lot better. Even in the past 2 years, it's gotten a whole lot better. but it's still lacking some things that page builders have. And these may or may not be important advantages to you, but just so you're aware of it. So, one thing's advanced features. When I show my demo of going away from Divi to the block editor, you'll see a page builder like Divi has a lot of properties, a lot of options. In fact, maybe too many, but that's a different, a different thing. But maybe there's something that you really need, or from design perspective, there's a lot of stuff like CSS animations and some built-in testing, that A/B testing, so you can see, how many people prefer one, or how many people are clicking on something one way versus another. So something that you would normally need separate tools for, some that's built into some of these page builders. Site editing, I still think this is one of the biggest advantages. That I'm saying page builders, but I also think this has to do with some of the themes themselves. So there's more mature site editing capabilities than the current WordPress full site editing. And again, this caveat is some of this is more of a theme feature than necessarily a standalone page builder. We'll talk about that a bit more, I think, when I show Divi as well. And then for specialized, more complex designs, again, some of these page builders have been around for a while. So if you have a heavy e-commerce site, let's say with WooCommerce, Divi in particular, there's lots and lots of third-party tools out there, and Divi modules, et cetera, for WooCommerce. So things like shopping carts, product modules, et cetera. There's definitely similar ones out there now for the block editor, but they're not free ones that are built in. Some page builders come with a lot more support for things like WooCommerce. Again, the paid versions of these page builders. And then pre-built designs, I think WordPress is getting better about this. Also show some examples from Divi of just a lot of these page builders now, you can, one click of a button, you download and you can load in almost an entire site, a starting point for a site with that. And obviously troubleshooting support. You get what you pay for, hopefully. So if you have problems, you can open a help desk ticket. Again, for WordPress, not so much. Open source is, you'd be shocked at sometimes the minimal amount of people working on something. And you have a community, obviously, for WordPress and people like us, all of us. But it's, if you have a client on the phone and there's a problem and you need something fixed, hopefully some of these paid page builders have a little bit more of a premium support tier to them. And again, community support as well. Again, not to say that WordPress doesn't. WordPress certainly has a lot of paid community support, but some of these page builders are huge communities, podcasts, forums, Facebook pages, etc., around Elementor, Divi, etc. So, there's tons of tutorials out there, as Peter said. In fact, sometimes a little confusingly, you're, like you said, you're just looking to solve a problem, and immediately they're, like you said, they're loading Divi or Elementor or whatever. You're like, wait a minute, what does that have to do with my problem? So. But again, there are certainly times where you still do need, or you may need a page builder.
Yes. Just
okay, this appears to.
Yeah, adding on to that a little bit, and then Ray, I'm just going to ask you to click through these as I go through them until I take over.
Yep.
Okay. Clearly there's I went and I tried to use blocks and it was so hard and so confusing. I just know, Beaver Builder or Elementor or Divi, but that's kind of the point. You do know what you know so well. So, being able to kind of ease in and see what the benefits are, and all of a sudden, and I've mentioned this on previous of our meetups, I was a Beaver Builder user, and I go back to those Beaver Builder sites, or like in just prepping for today, I was playing, and we'll see in a minute, I was playing with some other like Elementor, and they seem so much more difficult to me because I now use the block editor. So it really, and the lines between, some of those advantages, they continue to blur. There are always packages or premium themes that allow you to do the site editing that aren't necessarily a page builder. So, we have a lot of options, but there's no, and there's no exact right choice. So I'm going to continue on this slide here. So one of the things that between these tools, block editors and page builders, is that the concepts are very, very similar. Jumping between them, you could see, oh, okay, I'm using a block or a module or an element or a widget that does something. Here's a container that has something in it. I'm setting up rows and columns, and then I have a heading, and you're like, it's the same, just done differently and done differently within each one of the tools. So the concepts behind design are the same, and some of the things maybe Ray you'll get into, and if anybody's watched the videos by Jamie Marsland on YouTube where he rebuilds all kinds of sites using blocks, you can see it's just you grab a cover block and you put some text, and it's the same thing as this other module. Then you get into the more advanced modules. Blocks are similarly made up of smaller elements. This is one of the things that's kind of interesting, is that there's a nice block set called generate blocks, and generate blocks only has a handful of blocks because their approach to this is, well, all of those other blocks are just made up of smaller blocks inside it. So they're giving you those smaller components. And then it kind of is just more like a block pattern. So sometimes you go, oh, well, they have all of these blocks, and it's like, well, they're just pre-built, with maybe some additional functionality when you get into like an info card that might flip over or something like that. But again, the basic concepts are very similar. And then the third-party developers make page builder and block add-in, some of the same ones. The Astra people, for example, they're making blocks that are both for the block editor and for Elementor and for Beaver Builder and so on, so that they're just saying, well, the same thing, we'll just make it for these different tools. So there's a lot of similarity between these tools. It's just a different approach, or once you kind of get into one and you focus on it, that might be where you live. Next slide, Ray.
Yep.
So yeah, so the really what we're talking about tonight mostly, even though we've touched on the site editing or full site editing, is we're talking about primarily the content area. That is where, when you go to, you're adding a new page, you're adding a new post, and you go and you put the title and you start putting in the content, that's filling out the content area. This is separate from the header, footer, sidebars. Hooked elements are things like, when you have a nice theme or a theme builder that allows you to say, add a piece of content that's hooked above the header, below the header, above the footer, so you can lock in. You're basically creating additional content, additional places for this content. But the main thing that we're talking about right now is that primary content area, which again means that when you're editing that, that's what we're talking about controlling, and those other things about your site design are still attached to your theme, or if you do have a theme builder that you're using, that's all controlled by there. And like I kind of mentioning too, is that there are premium page builders that can be used to design site layouts. Right now with the new block themes, where we talk about full site editing. Now you're editing the header, the footer, and all kind of as part of the whole experience. Well, page builders do that, and some of these premium themes that are the classic themes that still allow you to do that. And then it's just a little graphic down here. This, by the way, done in blocks. Very simple. That's not a graphic. That's just some blocks with some borders around it. So we're talking about that main content area. It's funny too, like you look at sidebar left, sidebar right, widget areas within things. Some of these have even kind of being reduced. You don't always see a lot of them used the same way as maybe we did a few years ago. Yeah, so just kind of warnings as we talk about moving from, so turning off page builder plugins, your content will look different. If you've got content that's sitting there created using a page builder, and you turn that page builder tool off, you're generally going to lose your layout, design, and styles. Some page builders will leave the content that you then have to relay out. Others will leave you a bunch of code that you're just gonna have to clean out. So sometimes it's just better just to create it again versus trying to clean up what you've already done. Using now in terms of functionality, if you have a widget, a module that has a lot of functionality built in, that's all coming over from the page builder. So you need to find basically a replacement block or code that would do the same type of thing. If in fact you still want to do things the same way. And then kind of on the big thing, yeah, if you're using one of these tools, say you're using Beaver Builder and you've got the Beaver themer that allows you to do the headers and footers, and you say, well, I want to turn that off. Well, all your headers and footers are now going to be are going to be changed, and will in effect break. So you just have to kind of know there's a point in time when you say, I've moved the content over, now it's safe to turn off my plugins. And this also applies to
Blocks too.
plugins.
Yeah, I was
Yeah.
gonna bring that up too, because I'll show an example of that too when I'm rebuilding that. It's blocks are not immune from this too, depending on the type of block you're using. They can leave just as much garbage or unusable code if you turn off the block plugin itself too. And I'll show that with Cadence. I'll show an example of that quickly later, Peter.
Yeah. So again, making another example of how similar these tools are now becoming. It's kind of, you know, when you start moving down and using a tool set, that there are ways of getting out of it, but you just have to know the caveats of some of the things to look out for. Yeah, and kind of what I'm going to be kind of demonstrating in terms of the hybrid is page builders and the core editor work together. They were designed to work together from the beginning. Because generally, you know, the reason a page builder is called a page builder for the most part is because it was originally designed for your more design static pages, right? Your home page, your about page, landing pages that you might want to add a lot of design. While you were still using the core editor years ago, the what we're now calling the classic editor, which was just the text editor, now the block editor. And that was generally, you're going to use that for posts. So it was always, I want to say this carefully, but it was never really recommended to use page builders to build posts. Not that people haven't, but again, the idea of where and when, how to use those tools, that of course, like everything else, has the lines have been blurred because of the efficiencies and the way things are working. But right out of the gate, page builders were always meant to work side by side with the core editor, which means, you know, kind of what we're talking about with some of these hybrid things. That's why it works well. So we're going to kind of be talking about that in a bit. So let's just show that. I'm going to grab the screen. My demo is going to be pretty short because I'm just basically going to show, hey, these things work together. So let me share my screen. There we go. Okay, can we see a dashboard?
Yep.
All right, I'm going to show you what you shouldn't do. Ready? What? I have Beaver Builder active. I have Brizy active. I have Elementor active. I have some Cadence block actives. I have Visual Composer active. I was going to have Site Origin active, but Site Origin wasn't playing nicely. And you know, so these are all running right now. So if I am looking at my pages, if I look at very little here is particularly fancy. If I go to my Beaver Builder page, all right, this is using Beaver Builder. This is a page using blocks, Cadence blocks, and core blocks. This is some Brizy content, not much here, but that's all working. This particular Brizy content also turned off the header, so I'm going to go back here. This is an Elementor, a simple Elementor page. So these things can work together. Please don't do this. This is not advised because of now the overhead of all of this code working together. But the thing to pay attention to when I'm looking at my pages is that this is dependent on the builder. Because I noticed that Beaver Builder kind of changed how they do things, the way they used to and the way that most of the others do. So when you're looking at the pages that you've created, it's going to tell you if you're using an editor that's not the core editor. So on the Brizy page, I'm using the Brizy editor. Elementor page, I'm using Elementor. Now on the Beaver Builder page, instead of saying Beaver Builder there, it's basically saying here and edit with Beaver Builder. But see, now you see there's some overlap, like all of these edit the Visual Composer is trying to say, hey, do you want to edit with the Visual Composer? Do you want to edit? Well, in this case with Brizy, because it's there. Because if you have a page and you go the regular blocks page, I'll go here. You can when these things are running, and I'll turn some of these off to get rid of the confusion, but you can see where you can start working in one tool and then, no, I'm going to change it, but you're going to lose stuff and it's going to get confusing. And I'll see each one of these are saying, oh, would you like to edit with Elementor, which is active? Would you like to edit with Brizy, which is active? Visual Composer, and so on. So the main thing here is to say that you can use these things together. What I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to be maybe a little bit more realistic, and let me deactivate these so we get less. But here, let's do this real quick. So let me go back to my pages, and now let me go to my Brizy page and view that. Now I've deactivated Brizy. So this is what my page now looks like. I don't even know what this spinning circle is. this showed up, but yeah, exactly. But this was a design where we had the picture of the bird and a little contact. Now it's just saying, well, here's the content that you had, but any other of the coding that was attached to that no longer works. I turned off Elementor. If I go to view the Elementor page, it doesn't have any. It just has that text that was there. This is an Elementor page, which was in a cover block there. So this goes to show now in WordPress, and again for folks who haven't used it a lot, you can turn plugins off and back on, so you can see the impact and turn it back on and recover. The code is ultimately still there. It just doesn't have the code for the page is there, but it doesn't have the code for what the various plugin page builders do to make it work properly. So it's kind of important to know that you have the opportunities to kind of ease into something. The Visual Composer, it's the only thing it dropped. Oh, here's the white text. I guess I had a basically a container that had a background image with these, and now that the way that container works, it doesn't understand because Visual Composer was turned off. But the main thing being here, and so now the Beaver Builder page, which will still work because I did not turn off the Beaver Builder plugin, I can have this page in Beaver Builder, and then I can start building new pages, say using blocks, right? So if I go to use blocks, there we go. So these are still, right? So the normal blocks that we're kind of used to if you're using the block editor. But the two can live side by side. And this is what gives you the opportunity to start saying, hey, I've got some pages that are living my page builder, but the next page I do, let me try to use blocks. And that's exactly what I did for a client that had Elementor loaded just for some minimal design elements. And then when I went in, I just created things more using blocks. So it kind of migrated over time. So that was the approach that I took. Showing you really quick too, typically, again, if you're going to go do an add new post, the posts tend to, let me try something here with the page. If I go to page and add new, typically most of the builders are going to ask you, should I use the standard editor or should I use whatever editor it is? It's going to kind of give you that first bit. And even though Beaver Builder is loaded, if I wanted to just go to start adding blocks, I certainly could do that. So that's again something to keep in mind. The only reason I was bringing up the posts is again to show that you can just start adding posts kind of like it was always suggested, using the core editor, even though you might have a page builder sitting there. So these things live together. What do you think, Ray? Do you think
Yeah, no, I think that covered. I think one gotcha could be some themes like Divi, for example, it does let you, when you're building a page, I'm trying to think, maybe it's my Divi that's installed. I think if you don't use Divi, it'll default you right now to the classic editor. So that may be an option I've turned on at the Divi theme standpoint. So if you see the old classic editor, again, that's something else to be aware of, that somebody may have installed the classic editor plugin because they just want to force people to use page builder for all pages. So that may be something just to look forward to. So if you see something that's slightly different than what Peter saw of the block editor, yeah, be on the lookout for something like this, either the classic editor installed on its own as a plugin,
Right.
or when I bring up Divi, I think Divi had an option in there in the theme that basically is forcing, it doesn't show you the block editor by default.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. And another point to make very quickly too is that there are certain plugins and certain block packages that will want to bring over plugins with it. So this is the Spectra plugin that allows you to kind of load full pages and full sites, but it might be, okay, this is, do you want to build this as an Elementor site or a Beaver Builder site or a block site, even though they look kind of exactly the same, but it's going to, as part of its create these things with a one-click thing, it may also load some of the plugins that make all of that possible. So just to be, again, aware that it's like, oh, okay, hey, I've got a one-click page installer, fantastic, except for there's baggage that came over with it. So you do have to kind of go back to your, one of the easiest places is to look to see what's loaded and what's active in my plugins area. Gee, I'm not sure what that does. Deactivate it and take a look. Whether it's on your staging site or on a quiet time on your live site, so.
Yeah, I think this hybrid approach, I mean, the reason we're presenting this, it may seem obvious, but I think for a lot of people, it's not. If you're using strictly Page Builder, you may not have known that you can still build pages not using that edit with whatever Elementor or Divi, etc. But I think this is probably the most low risk way to start getting your feet wet with the block editor if you're not familiar with it. Wouldn't you agree, Peter, that this is like, because you can build, you don't have to touch your existing content. This is a way to start at least seeing what the effort's like, getting familiar with the tools, and then you may be ready for the demo part that I'm going to show next, which is
I said that you're
building.
But this idea that you could even, you could replicate a page under a different URL and then at some point change them over and switch them and start demoting your page builder pages. But I assume that might be part of what you're covering. So shall I hand it over to you?
Yes, I can grab the screen too. So yeah, so my approach is more the drastic of, this is not a hybrid. This is a living, working together. This is it's time to do a rebuild. So again, we're not talking about necessarily, and we're not going to have time today to show rebuilding a full site. What I'm hoping to show in, let's say, 30-ish minutes or slightly less, because I want Q&A time, is I just want to kind of start introducing some ideas of showing the process a bit. Some of it's like what Peter said before, it's recognizing like for like as you're working between these two tools, and just showing you some things that are different and that you should be aware of. But this approach is more about again, how do you start learning a new tool, but at least having some sort of example of the page or site that you built using a page builder. So we're not saying totally throw away your site and spend a month rebuilding it in the block editor, but maybe this is something you do on the side. In particular, this is probably a good thing to do for like your own personal website if that was built using a page builder. It's like, hey, start rebuilding that because it's a low risk thing. So again, first off, the number one caveat here is don't do this on your production site. Don't do this on your live site, because this is more of a no turning back kind of thing. So for folks who weren't following some of our sessions from a couple of years, it was almost 2 years ago now, of building a site together from scratch. One tool that we've mentioned before, and I kind of just revisiting this, if you're not familiar with it, is Local. So this is Local by Flywheel. I'm not sure that's even its official name anymore. Now it's just probably just called Local itself. If you search for this tool, there's downloads you can do for Windows, Mac, etc. But what's cool about this is you can basically create a sandbox environment for WordPress on your desktop. A lot of other ways to do this. We've covered this in past presentations you can look at, but this is just a real quick way to build an isolated environment. You don't need any hosting to do this. Just do this on your computer. Take it with you on the go. So
yeah, Ray, real quick, mine was
Yep.
I was using InstaWP. So
yeah, exactly. So Peter had one that's more of a shared hosting thing. This one's just running locally. No one else can see this. So I have created, so to set the stage for the example I'm going to be walking through, I have a sample page here. So I have one site. This is our page builder site, and this page was a page that was built from Divi. So back to what I said before. So Divi elegant themes / layouts. And Elementor has something similar, but one of the nice things is when you purchase a subscription to Divi, it has this built-in layout packs, and they release new ones of these almost every week. Quite honestly, I think just between me and you, because I have the lifetime subscription. After a while, these designs are just I don't know, the quality of them has gone down a little bit, and some of them are bordering on the ridiculous in terms of their examples. But again, if you're starting up a farmer's market and you're looking for a quick start layout pack, again, this is one of the advantages, I guess, you get some starting point. It pulls in images of figs and things like that. So anyway, this page that I'm showing was one of those. It was a sample from, I don't even remember what it was. So I'm setting the stage of how would we rebuild something like this. Just to show you a little bit. Again, this is built in Divi, so it's got some styling, and it's got some some people like these effects and all that. So it looks stylish, I'd say. And I'm going to try to rebuild this in a plain vanilla site, but just again for transparency's sake. What do I have installed in the site right now? The theme I'm using is Cadence. So let's talk about that for a second. We've talked about the Cadence theme many times in the past. Cadence is a free theme that I'd say is the right word for it is, but block-friendly theme. You don't, again, with blocks, you don't have to. The nice thing is you do have flexibility. So even though I'm also using the Cadence blocks, which is a separate install, it's a little bit confusing, but I don't have to use the Cadence theme with the Cadence blocks, but I find that they both work really well together. So with a block, once you go into the block editor, you do want a theme that at least does provide you with some of that functionality that you may be more familiar with a page builder. So for example, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but Divi itself, Divi is a little confusing that it's both a page builder and a theme. I think at one point you could actually, and you may still be able to do it, but for the most part, you can't really separate the page builder of Divi from the Divi theme. They're all baked in together, for better or for worse. But Divi as a theme itself does give you a lot of other theme related things. And I won't talk about this tonight, but we talked about full site editing a little bit earlier. So in here, Elementor has something similar, like templates and all that, as Peter mentioned. So we have the idea of like a theme builder in Divi. So again, that there may be extra complicated things that you're using in your page builder that, quite frankly, the block editor alone can't solve for you. So that's where I'm mentioning that in this example we're using Cadence because the free Cadence theme gives us enough full site editing stuff. The paid version of Cadence actually gives you a lot more full site editing, just again. But I'm going to try to do this as vanilla as possible. So how would you approach this? This goes back to, if I'm going to rebuild, and there's many ways to do this, if I'm going to try to rebuild this kind of a page using just blocks, and again, we're not going to have enough time to do all this. We talked about this before when you're looking at sites. You think about a website or any web page you look at in terms of the components that make up that page. And in general, these are different sections, and I'll show you, we'll verify that in a second. So how do you eat the elephant one bite at a time, that cliche. So you kind of have to look at the page itself and say, well, how will I rebuild this in blocks? So in Divi, let's kind of start there. There's two ways, and not all page builders, I haven't used Beaver Builder in a while. I think Elementor is kind of like this. There's two ways to edit things in Divi now. Divi has the visual builder, which has been around for a couple of years now. When you click on that, it's basically giving you this really, Squarespace-ish type of view where I can click on things here, I can edit them directly. That's nice, but personally, I think it's hard to see structure when you're working on a page like this. So if I was going to convert this from Divi to, like we're going to do tonight, to a block, the block editor, first thing I want to do is I actually want to see the layout, the full layout. So there's two ways to do this. One is in Divi itself. You click on the three little dots here. You can go to what's called the wireframe view. So personally, I still like, this is what the old Divi looked like. So this will show you the sections in here, and you can always flip back and forth between the visual and the wireframe. That's one way to do it. I'm actually going to go even one step further and just go back into the page itself. And if you just edit the page in here, mine is set up so by default it goes to this old view just because I like it better. It's easier to manage things this way. So this is showing the structure of this site and of this page. So as Peter said before, some of it comes down to how familiar you are with the page builder that you're trying to move away from. So even some people I think who use Divi are, if you've inherited a site in particular, you may not be aware of this, but all these different colors have meaning. So in Divi, this whole thing is a page, but each of these sections have a different meaning. So the blue is a section, green is a row. These other things are modules. This is a special type of section. It's a full screen section. So knowing that structure and knowing that, for example, this is a row with 4 columns, as you can see, that's going to help you when you try to rebuild this into the block editor. Because again, we're just talking about now trying to basically copy, and unfortunately there's no magic copy button of exporting from this into the block editor. Maybe someday there will be, or if someone is an entrepreneur, you could do that and build something like that. But unfortunately, the way to do it, or one of the ways to do it, is rebuilding from scratch. So let's look at this, and we'll probably only have time to honestly to build this one section here. But so Divi calls this a hero section, but it's just a section. There's nothing special about it. So when I'm in my new site and I'm creating my home page, I have one. If we run out of time, I'll show you. I've rebuilt it already, but let's just start from scratch. So how would I recreate a section here? Well, I have two options right now in the block editor. I have, and I'll show all the blocks here. Because I have Cadence blocks installed. Again, these are the free ones. Cadence has a section and a row layout, but the WordPress blocks also have a scroll down. It's in the design area here. It has what's called a group. The group is basically the equivalent of a section, and then has rows and columns. So why would I use one versus the other? Well, this one, I'm gonna cheat a little bit, and in this example, I'm gonna use the Cadence one because I know I've built this already. So the hard lesson learned was I started off with a group, and I found eventually there were some settings that I really were missing. So again, we're going back to, we're 5 years into the block editor. It's a lot better than it was before, but as you'll see, as we get into some details here, it's still missing some settings and some properties that page builders provide and expose. So just again, to cut to the chase here, I'm going to drop in a section. Start off with the section here. Oops, section. There we go. And going back to how would I build this? So this is a section, and I'm going to flip back and forth a little bit. So what's in this section? So as Peter said before, I mean, Divi has this is a component, a module in Divi, which is called the full width header module. Okay, what is in this really? It's basically a headline, a piece of text, and a button. So they have a specialized module for that. So some block groups that you install will have something similar, or this idea of a headline, some text and a button quite often is called either a hero or call to action section. So if I wanted to be even lazier, we're gonna build this from scratch, but as we're adding components in here, one thing you could do is even inside of, I'm gonna add a row here to begin with, Cadence itself comes with some pre-made layouts. So for example, a lot of them are in the pro version, but even for free, something like this, or what do they call it? They call it a, where is it? Not logo, pricing, location, list. Hero, I guess. I mean, it was under hero. Thing that like this is pretty much exactly what I want, but it's pro. So I'm sticking to the rules here of doing this as free. But basically this, rather than, Cadence would provide this full built out hero section or call to action for me, we can easily just build it ourselves and group it together into sections. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to start off by looking at this saying, all right, so I've got a piece of text here which says explore the world. And again, to do this, you can either just in the page builder, copy the text, highlight it here, or I would say if you're going to start, we're trying to rebuild things, you really want to dig a little bit deeper. So let's start with the content first. And again, we're just going to try to do one of these. So I'm going to copy the title here. So what is a title? From a component standpoint, the title is a heading. So I can use the built-in WordPress heading just for starters. So let me say that I'm going to explore the world. And then what do I have below it? I have another piece of text, which says this kind of placeholder text, lorem ipsum text. So there, I'm going to add that, paste that, and then I'm going to have a button. So I'm starting, this was my, depending on your preference of how much you want to learn from this, I'm starting with the generic components that come with WordPress. I'm cheating. I'll tell you, jumping to the end here, we're gonna have to convert some of these into Cadence blocks because some of the things we want to do, the vanilla ones from WordPress blocks don't necessarily meet our needs right now. But just let me start filling in some things to learn more. Okay, so if I'm looking at this so far, I have the main components of this, but you're probably saying to yourself, Ray, it looks nothing like the piece that you have here. You're right. So what am I missing? I'm missing this whole background, right? That's the first thing. If I look at the section, the section has a certain size. So this is probably a good time to talk about the process. One of the things that page builders do, Divi, again, I'll stick with Divi for now, is they provide lots and lots of options. And unfortunately, a lot of those options are hidden behind these property, kind of these property settings. So you kind of have to know what you're looking for. And unfortunately, it's not easy to tell what's changed from default. So for example, here there's a background, but it's just a background color. So where is this image? Where did the mountains come from? It's from the row. It's not actually from the section, but there is this background color. So I do know I need to have some sort of filter on top of that image. So I'm just going to copy that, that number, the hex number for now, for this, whatever this dark color is. But what else is in here in these settings? I won't go through all of it, but you can see there's probably something around the sizing in here. Well, no, there's not. There's probably something around the spacing. Yep. So it's removed padding from everything. So it's all 0 pixel, 0 pixel, 0 pixel. So this is the tedious part a little bit. As you're rebuilding these things, if you really want it to be exactly looking like what you started from, you have to go through a lot of these properties and see what's changed. So again, if you're the one who built it, wonderful. Hopefully it's still fresh in your mind. But if somebody else built this, ideally, well, I don't know if it's ideal, your first starting point is you have to be looking at all of these different properties to see what's changed. Did they add a border? Is there something obvious or not so obvious in here? So going through each of these settings. One other one that you definitely want to make sure of is, did they add any special classes too? So that's going to be a little bit more difficult. Then you're going to have to find out the CSS rules that maybe somebody applied outside of the page builder. I would say in general, if someone's using a page builder, not to stereotype, but they're probably not doing a lot of custom CSS. They're probably using the properties inside of the page builder components. That's where they're setting things like the fonts and all that kind of stuff. So again, just something to be aware of. It's tedious, but this is kind of the starting point. Let's do something real quick. I'll go to the row here. Again, go back to my this section here, and we know that this guy has a background somewhere. So where is that? Okay, so it has a background. Again, this is Divi. Elementor is slightly different. This design's a little bit strange, but there's a background image. There we go. So there's the mountains. So what I'm going to do over here is in my layout, I've got this section. So can I add a background image to here? Let's see. Yes, I can. I can add background image, and I already have that one in here. Oops, let me move my Zoom window. Sorry, select. So it's getting there. There's still some styling things, etc., that are missing from this. So this is where eventually you may run into some issues to say, wait a minute, I really need to do this as something different. Like, in fact, I probably need to put this inside of a row instead, because then I can start doing some more things around spacing. Like now, actually, I believe in a regular section, I can start adding padding around this, etc. I could add a filter to this, and I probably want to change the buttons to look a bit different. So I'm gonna cheat a little bit here. Because one other thing, again, going back to the base components, or base blocks that come from WordPress, something that would seem fairly trivial, like, for example, I know that this text in here is not the standard text. So I know, for example, Explore the World, that title, if I look at the design tab, what is this title text? Oh, it's the Oswald. It's one of the Google fonts. It's an Oswald bold. That just says it's capitals, 80 pixels large, 1.3 M's, all that kind of stuff. Well, unfortunately, in the standard WordPress heading, I don't have the ability to change. I can change size. I can change size to 80 pixels. I can change I can make it bold. What I can't change right now is through here, I can't change the actual font to make it what was it, Oswald. I can change it at the default of the theme level, but I can't change it in this individual component. So that's where eventually you may run into an issue where you say, okay, you know what? I really need to change this into the Cadence one, because in Cadence now I can actually go and say, all right, give me a font family of, what was it, Oswald?
Hey, Ray, can I interrupt you for a second?
Sure. Yep.
That technique that you used about 10 seconds ago, I think is, again, something to continue to showcase, which is the transform, or to change one thing into another thing if they're similar. This allows you, for example, to put initially most of your content in like paragraphs, and then say, now I'm going to make it a heading, now I'm going to make it a this, now I'm going to make it a that. So Ray took the core heading block, and it easily transforms into the advanced text or the heading block of in this case, Cadence. So when you click on the block type, you'll see all the options that you can switch it to. He could have switched it to a paragraph, for example.
Correct. Yeah. So you can see, again, just for the sake of time, I'm not going to have the time to do all of this, but you can see by using the Cadence, this is their advanced heading, I forget the name, advanced text block. Now I have some of those same properties that I had in Divi. Not everything, but I do have the ability now to really match the design from my page builder. So I have the ability to set things like title line height. I have the ability to set things like, if I wanted to, shadows, colors, etc. Or, so that's one key aspect to this. We talked about this a little bit, is, the block that you're going from the page builder, it's finding a corresponding block. I'm sorry, the module, whatever element you want to call it, from your page builder. When you're rebuilding it as a block, you need to find a block that at least has enough of the properties that you're trying to recreate. So sometimes sometimes you just need a text. Again, where Divi drives me crazy is if I just added in here, I'll add somewhere below, Divi doesn't have like a plain old text. It has a text thing, but this is the kind of thing I can just copy this into a paragraph, basically, unless I'm doing something crazy, unless I'm doing some of the things you don't want to do, like scroll animations, flying animations, all that kind of jazz. But otherwise, if it's just plain old text, that is something you can use the plain vanilla paragraph block from WordPress and just recreate it simply that way. So sorry, I'm just jumping around a little bit here. So if you look at this process, it seems a little bit tedious, but basically in the end, it's going through component by component, or piece by piece is probably a better way. I don't even want to throw in components. It's a loaded term. It's going through piece by piece and finding those design elements that were set in your page builder and saying, well, how do I apply those same things in blocks? And one other thing I'll just show kind of quickly too is, so if I look at this now, I mean, obviously this looks nothing like what this looks like, right? Right now you're like, Ray, that still looks terrible. It doesn't look anything close to what this looks like. Well, because I haven't finished styling it, again, I wouldn't have the time here to go through everything. I'll show you in a second one that looks a bit closer to it. But the other thing to be aware of too is back to the theme, where your theme is very important. Is if I look at this in preview for now, oops, let's save it first. Let me do update. Let me view the page. This looks even less like what I think. It's like, oh, what is this? Why is it showing the page header? Why is my stuff in a white box? Well, now those are additional properties that you need to consider that are really actually part of your theme. So I'll just show you this real quick. If you're not familiar with Cadence, Cadence at the page level, by default, it's going to show the page title above, above your page. Well, let me get rid of that. Let me disable that. And then the content style, I want it boxed or unboxed? In this case, let's just say, let's make it unboxed. And let me just show one more thing. Let's make it full width. So let me update this real quick. Now, does this look a little bit better? It's getting there. So this is the process of it. It ain't easy when you first do this, but it wasn't, in all fairness, it probably wasn't easy to build this from scratch either. They went through the designer, because I didn't build this page. The original designer went through the same process. It's just they were building it, using the built-in Divi modules, the built-in Divi properties that they were setting. So you have to, basically follow that same process as you're rebuilding this as blocks. And like I said, the ideal thing is, for a starting standpoint, if you have something that's already built like this, or again, get a sample page or something, practice that yourself. Go into each of these different sections. So go into the modules, go into the rows, and take a look at, okay, why is it, what am I missing? In some cases, it's, the padding, it's under the design options. So maybe the sizing. Oh, so here's a good one too. If I look at this, how did they do these rows? These rows look like they're perfectly stacked together. Well, there's no gutters. There's a gutter of 0 or 1 in this. You can do that too. I mean, you can do that with blocks. Just you need to know that setting. So you need a row or columns removing gutters. So it's understanding the settings in one and reapplying those into the block editor. So let me just show again, we don't have time to look at this whole thing. Let me show kind of what this does look like mostly. And I play around with this morning, so I apologize if it's not 100% there. But here's something that looks a bit better. Let me show this in the desktop view. This looks closer. Again, maybe my colors are a little bit off. I don't think I matched this exactly, but I'd say we're getting closer, right? So I probably have to move this over a bit more. So there's some sizing thing that needs to happen. But otherwise, it's getting a lot closer to what what the page builder layout was. And how did I do this? Again, I have a section here. I ended up putting everything into a row. Again, the row has these. I made the advanced heading. I made this just a regular text, and then I used the advanced buttons. So advanced buttons allowed me to do things like do the alignment better, to do the fonts better, to do spacing better. There are just more properties in here than there were in the plain vanilla ones. So again, there's no magic button of convert from a page builder. It's really going through the steps and the exercise of looking at each individual piece and building it piece by piece, making sure what you have matches up to your design. Just one last thing, then I'll stop, and then we'll look at questions, and I won't have enough time for questions too. But back to Peter's other point around, and I know you kind of showed this with the page builder, Peter, but let me just show you too that this even blocks are not immune to the problem of turning them off and things not working. So for example, what was the one I was looking at? Oh, the countdown block, for example. So this is kind of neat, right? This little countdown thing. Well, if I turn off, I'll show you here. If I turn off the blocks, the cadence blocks, deactivate it for now. If I go back to that page, what am I going to see? This is home to a whole lot of nothing, because it doesn't know what to do with it. In fact, all my stuff is gone. It's all disappeared. If I go into edit the page, it's going to give me one of these, like, oh, wait a minute, unsupported, not good. So they're not immune too. That's where we're back to our thing about one versus the other. Especially as your blocks become more specialized, that's when you're going to run into more issues. I think the advanced, I was actually a little bit surprised, because I think the advanced heading one, I play around with a little bit more. that typically will preserve it. Maybe it's because it's white. Maybe you can't see the text at a background around it. So the simpler blocks you use, the more likely they are to be retained, their styling retained, even if you shut off the block plugin. All right, I'll shut up for a while. So I don't know if there's any questions, Peter, you see anything in the chat, or I can also, hold on, let me take everyone up.
It was just one thing we clarified was the fact that you were working on two different sites. So
Yes.
that idea of the Divi options versus the cadence options. There was some comments looking at the heading block and what's available, and cadence you can dig into even more font settings, but the core block does have a and more functionality built into it. And we've also found, by the way, that there are blocks that and I have a task for another thing that I haven't done yet. Eagle knows what I'm talking about, of kind of tracking some of the things that work in core blocks, but when you have a block theme active, then a core blocks when you have a classic theme active, you don't necessarily get all of the options for some reason. I'm not even sure what the reasoning is behind some of that, but there are a lot of variables.
And let me show, I'm sorry, that just sort of sparked this too. So again, Peter had talked about this earlier on of trying to do the matching one for one, and I won't have a chance to go through all of these, but in some cases, excuse me, in some cases, there is a one-for-one match with an existing WordPress core block. So for example, the one we've looked at a couple of times, text, that's an obvious one. So there's a paragraph block. That's exactly what it is. Where things get a little bit more confusing is in Divi. One of the things I really don't like, they haven't updated these blocks in so long, it drives people crazy. But so for example, they have one in here somewhere. Where is it? It's like a team, or it's a person block. So what is this thing? What's this person block? If I put in Ray, et cetera, some garbage text in here and an image, unfortunately, the only image I have, I think, is that giant. Oh, here we go. These people, that looks great. So, this is where things get a little bit tough. If this is the block that you're trying to recreate, now what is this thing? So I'll try to hopefully show it real quickly. It's a picture of a person with a name and a title or something. You've got to think about either there's two options for you if you're trying to rebuild this in blocks. One is you can rebuild those components, again, picture, title, something, etc. Or there's probably a block out there for it. In fact, I know there's a person or a team block elsewhere. I don't think Cadence has it necessarily, but what's the other one there? There's plenty of other block packages out there. You can search for person block. So that's another way to do it. In general, you're likely to find somebody else either has built the very specific block that you want, or it's part of a package, often free, that you can use.
Yeah.
Where I would say the caution of that, and I'll definitely like to hear other opinions on this, is, moving to blocks, you can also start introducing some confusion into your own life too. Something slightly not as bad as a page builder, but you can end up with block confusion. I know, Peter, at one point, I think you had showed that there's another plugin that shows you like which blocks you're actually using on a page, which ones you aren't. So, be very careful. Don't install like a full, block package just for the person block. That, in my opinion, that's a bit of overkill, and that's going to become harder to maintain over time, because you're like, where am I using this thing, or where did this thing come from? So, any other? I'd love to hear from other. Sorry, I had people still on mute when I was doing my presentation. I took everyone off mute too. I'd love to hear others' experience on this for anyone else who has converted pages or sites from a block editor. I'm sorry, from a page builder. How did that experience go for you? Any painful tips or tricks, or advice you'd like to share of things you would do now that if you only knew?
I have more of a question. Does anyone, I miss not being able to view the whole page at once. Do you know what I'm saying? Like working on just a block section. I find that I find myself a little lost.
Yeah, so with so again, if I'm in the blocks, I'm looking at this page. Here's the one I actually built out. You can see the page. I mean, you're right. The view is a bit squished. It's not exactly what you see. If I close I just happen to have the list view open. I mean, you're getting closer to, and you can close this up as well too.
Yeah.
So you are getting to more of a full screen experience, but you're right. It's not exactly like, and this is where, again, I'm not sure if the Gutenberg, the block editor, is going to get exactly to this level, but in sorry, in my Divi one, where the heck is Divi? Oh, here it is. In my Divi page builder, I can actually go into the Divi view. Sorry, it's better up here, where it is this visual builder, where this is a full complete screen thing, right? So
Right. And that's what I'm used to, and I guess miss about the block editor.
yeah, I mean, there are parts that are getting to this, but you're right. One thing and this is, for better or for worse, in things like Divi, or if you use Squarespace or Wix, those kind of things, they do give you options of like, oh, I want to change my padding. Let me just grab my padding here. Let me change.
Right.
Oh, let me do this. Good and bad.
Yeah.
Sometimes bad if you didn't mean to do that. And you're like, how the heck do I bring it back? And where did everything go? Yeah, I don't think it's quite there yet. I mean,
Yeah.
actually, with Cadence, I guess you can. I think this is more of a Cadence thing, right? So this does let you do some of that.
Yeah, there are a lot of variables, and this whole idea of saying, okay, we're working pretty much on the content areas as we put in the slide, and kind of keeping that in mind. This is where some people will say and be real proponents of, well, if you're using a block theme and then you've got the whole full site editing, you kind of are looking at everything all at once. I'm not there yet. I still like my small set of classic themes. Although I am intrigued by Ollie is one I'm practicing with. That's a block theme that I like. So and they're now on the repository. So that's a block theme that offers a lot.
The other thing is people are thinking other questions, and we can sort of do other questions outside of our topic tonight too. But just one last kind of thing too, that I'd say over the past year or two, with some of the improvements in WordPress, some other things that I thought I would never leave, like a page builder, like again, Divi is the one I really started early on with, was things that I really enjoyed about Divi was this ability to do things like do things like create these libraries. So this has nothing to do with the full site editing, but within Divi itself, I could save modules, I could save rows, I could save sections, et cetera, and then have them in my library. So then I'd open up another page and I could then add them. Now that's built into WordPress core. Now you have the ability. It doesn't quite have this nice look and layout yet. That's full site editing thing to look at that, but having the ability to save and reuse just from or setting globals and things like that, that's built into the block editor. So those are other great features too, that if that's another reason that you're thinking of not giving up your page builder, more of those kind of things I think are getting incorporated into WordPress, into the block editor. So I think that's another great feature. I mean, one thing I wish they had too, is I don't have one here, is the ability, I needed it today, working on a client site, the ability to fully export pages and pulls down all your templates with you. I mean, with Divi, it's pretty simple. I can import and export, and then reuse an entire layout across different sites. But again, things are getting there. So just the theme of tonight is, if you've been hesitant about trying out the block editor, I think we should hopefully show you two different ways to do it. I mean, Peter's hybrid approach, I'd say, is probably the one of starting off fresh and starting off new is always a better thing, because then you know what you're building if you're starting with a brand new design. The way I showed, perhaps a bit more tedious, but to be honest, it's not anything specific to the block editor. Like if somebody said, hey, rebuild this Divi site into Elementor, or vice versa, you'd be doing the same process. You'd have to figure out, where is this component in Elementor, where's this component in Divi or Beaver Builder, etc. So don't do that on your live site. Do that in some sandbox environment. But the key thing I think is just recognizing, especially those big the similarity. There's a lot more similarities I think now between these things than there used to be. So a row is a row, columns, etc. So hopefully that made sense to folks. What else we got? Any other questions around?
Just one quick comment that I thought was kind of funny was that you mentioned the classic editor. It always confused me because my site's a Divi site, and yeah, I couldn't figure out this block editor. Where is it? Why can't I see it? What's going on? I realized that I have a plugin called, and I didn't build my site from the start. I took it over, but there is in fact a classic editor plugin.
Yeah,
So
and you don't even
very
need
confusing.
that. Yeah, and just I'm glad you noticed that, because this site, just to show you, you don't even need that plugin installed necessarily. So for example, this is my plain vanilla Divi site, as plain vanilla as Divi can get. And as you see from a plugin standpoint, I do not have the classic editor plugin installed here. But if I go to my pages, let me try add new. It's defaulting to the classic editor. So why is it not defaulting to the block editor? Well, it's because in my Divi theme, under my theme options, somewhere under here, I forget where it is. It's under Builder, I think, Advanced, and here, enable the classic. It's so it's buried in the theme itself. So you got to be careful. It could be in two different places. So,
And if you're using, if you're using the classic editor, then everything we've talked about recreating won't work for you. It's kind of important to know. And now you're getting into the whole world of short codes and all of the hard ways we did things a number of years ago. So, which is again why page builders became so popular.
Yeah, and one, again, here we have five years into the block editor / Gutenberg, and as I said, it's come a long way. The old Virginia Slims thing, come a long way, baby. But it's still there's a lot left to go. I do have this little fear, especially as I was preparing for this thing, and as I was doing that whole demo of how to rebuild. What's the block editor going to look like 5 years from now? Is it going to look like Divi and Elementor?
Right.
Like, I don't know. Like, I'm sorry, I keep like flipping my screen on and off, but over time, just kind of like Microsoft Word and Excel, if you're familiar, obviously most people are familiar with those, they become more and more bloated. So like, if I look at what these modules look like in Divi, for example, I think I showed that text module, but let's look at the image module. I mean, do I really need, what is this? 1, 2, 3,
Right.
10, 12 of these? Do I need 12 of these? Do I need like this bizarre scroll effects and all this junk? Like, are we ever going to see this junk fall into WordPress core? Boy, I hope not. But somebody may need this. Somebody may like that old, MySpace look of flashing things and scrolling and all that. Don't do it. I think that's it too. If you can keep your designs simpler, where you don't use all this crazy extraneous fluff, it makes it a lot easier, I think, to rebuild these things, and also just better user experience in general. So
but please don't use like animation because you have animation that you can use. I mean, if there's an effective reason for it, but yeah, there's definitely, you see in the different forums and groups that go, oh, well, this one has more features, that one has more features, when are they going to add more features? And it's like, there are so many features that you just don't need. Or, oh, they got more blocks, and it's like, yeah, look at it, 10 of those blocks are just 2 blocks glued together, which is no different than if you did it or a block pattern. So it's just, like you're saying, right, be careful about how deep you get into some of these things. The future, I think, is going to be, they're just going to continue to make the front end and the back end work more closely together, which is exactly what we're seeing with block themes. But doing it in a way that my DIY advocate, non-coders can go in and do, and actually it's even harder for coders in a lot of cases, because they are trying to make things much more non-coding, and then this idea of going in and saying, oh, but we'll just do that with CSS. And it's like, well, the percentage of people who are using WordPress versus those who know CSS, Those are different, you know, one's a
And
subset of.
that's why the page builders were, and I see your hand,
Right.
Laura. So I mean, that's the reason why page builders were popular. It was like, well, no PHP. I was like, well, no, I wanted to set up my layouts and not have to learn PHP. And everything that you saw in that little, the menus I showed in Divi, you can set every one of those, almost, I think every single one of those things just using native CSS if you knew it. But it's a lot more convenient, as Peter was saying, for people not who just, they know what they want to do. They don't want to learn the lines of code to do it. So that's where the page builders and some blocks, I think, kind of mask that from you. But behind the scenes, it's all CSS. Laura, you got your hand raised.
Yeah, I'm still I'm still new to all of this. I've only been doing websites for a year. So I'd like to know from everyone here, do you use a page builder and which one do you use currently? So I wanted to know that. I'm also a contributor to the training team. So I'm one of the people that makes tutorials to better understand the site editor, block editor. So I'd love to hear things that if you've tried it, what you're frustrated with that we could possibly touch on in future presentations and tutorials.
Sure. I won't answer, and maybe Peter, we won't answer. So what others, and Ted has your hand raised. If you're going to answer, so are other people using page builders, and if so, which page builder are you using?
Well, I can speak for myself in that I've gone through any number of page builders. And of course, I settled on Oxygen, and it was my mission in life to become a guru in Oxygen. And that's not going to happen now because, it's like trying to learn to tune your own Ferrari or something. It's pointless. So I've gone to Generate Press and Generate Blocks. And that's basically where I'm going to live now. And my mission for the winter is to transfer all of my HTML sites, ultimatum sites, Oxygen sites, what you have it. I'm going to put them all in Generate Press and Generate Blocks and be done.
There you go.
I'm curious, how many people, because Elementor was I'd say it was the hot thing a couple of years ago, just not too long ago, but maybe the past 2 years, all you heard about was Elementor. It's the most fashionable thing. I'm curious of people here, if you put in the chat, how many people are using Elementor primarily as their page builder? Anyone?
That's surprising.
It's kind of been interesting. I do think it's cooled down a bit, at least in the blogosphere as things go. It's like, I think, and that maybe just is a general thing around page builders. I do sense that they've, me personally, it seems like they've kind of reached their peak. I mean, you still see them, obviously, a lot of sites are built using them, but
Yeah.
it does kind of feel like there's a little tipping point now where some people are saying, hey, let's just, build sites entirely with the block editor.
So I'm in the same boat as Gene and Wendy, who mentioned inheriting websites done in Elementor. And that's for those who are working on other sites. That's where something like what we're talking about, it's just the tip of the iceberg, but we are often inheriting sites that are either built with a page builder, or earlier in the chat, there was some theme forest discussion. And just, the whole idea of themes that were developed by, independent developers putting it on theme force. And it was all, I called it the kitchen sink theme, where it was all about, look how many features I have, and look at my slider, which now they're using the Revolution slider, and all of the overhead that has, and all of these things. But I've worked on some sites that I picked up, or see the clients that were like, oh, they picked the education theme, and it had so many things that were either coded into some box somewhere, or you had to know how to use the widget area and give it and it was so not intuitive. So you look at it, and half the time when somebody is, say somebody takes over a role, and we did this a couple of years ago, what happens when you take over a website? And you have to go in and deconstruct a lot of times and go, I don't know where this one little thing that I don't know how I can change the phone number, here. There's no obvious place. And I think the block editor, the even page builders have made a lot of that far easier than this idea of you have to know what setting under something or.
I would agree. Yeah, I think it's easier. Like I've even jumping, I don't do a lot with Divi. You know, jumping between a Divi site and Elementor site, I actually find simpler than jumping to those older sites where, like I said, they're constructed with custom themes or some other, you know, you're searching around. So
Or even some of us have been around for a while, went through the whole Genesis Studio kind of thing.
Works. Yeah.
Hey guys,
Yeah.
Ted's had his hand up for a while.
Yep. Yep.
Hi, Ted.
That was sweet. Thank you. So this is partly an answer, but it's partly a question. So I've been using Block for the last month. I started using Divi when it first came out, bought a lifetime thing. But I'm bringing a friend, a musician, his old HTML site. Finally convinced him to go to a WordPress, and I said, I'll do it for you.
Yeah.
But he's my age, and we're both looking about, the time when we disappear, we want our websites to be able to be managed by somebody. So I said, I'm not going to even put you on Divi. I'm going to put you on this. I'm going to put you on the 2023 theme and just make it plain vanilla with only a migration plugin. So, but it's an extremely deep listing of his father's music that's still published. So I had a page that I was working on Sunday, which had 5 blocks, each of which contained tables. And so I'd spent a lot of time on them, pasting. And I'm down here in the final one. And then I scroll up and I took a photograph. I was so worried. I've never, ever seen this in Divi. It says, it took one of the whole tables, basically a block. It says, the block has encountered an error and cannot be previewed.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't notice the verb previewed. I just thought maybe it had gone away. I went and looked at my rendering of it, of my last save, which I do all the time. It looked okay there. So I just exited out.
Yeah.
And of course, I gave you the warning.
Mm-hmm.
I went back in there and it was there. So is it just a preview problem? Do you know what this is?
Divi is notoriously resource heavy. In fact, on some hosting, Divi, that visual builder, I've seen many, especially like Host and those sites.
He's not using Divi.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, this one is what we're talking about.
Block editor. Okay.
Never saw that in Divi, but I saw it there.
Yeah.
So
where's the site hosted?
Yeah.
Ionos.
So I don't know why you're using tables in a block. But if you're building 5 tables or building tables in 5 blocks, you could be running into a memory error.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So there are what Eagles, I think, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but yeah, sometimes you'll run into things that are purely because of what's happening in the browser as far as rendering things. Sometimes it's on the server side. And then we could maybe spend a couple minutes on how others might approach the challenge that you had. Because again, there's so many different ways. Whether you do it in a table, we'd probably do it a different way or use a different table plugin if a table is the right way. But Eagle, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I did.
No, you got it. That's cool.
Block, right?
So
like
one thing you can
table.
One thing you can do is go into your Ionos cPanel and go into like multi PHP or somewhere in your PHP settings and up the memory. Generally, the memory is set to 256. You might bump the memory up to like 512 on the server, and that might help you.
And you could see that also. So you can, if you go to site info as well on your site, you should be able to see under the server like how much is allocated.
Yeah, 256 is standard for most sites, but generally in your cPanel, and I'm assuming Ionos has a cPanel, there is usually sometimes it's called, I don't know, different I just search for PHP and it's like multi PHP or something. Basically the one that lets you change the PHP settings. and you want to bump the memory setting up to like 512. I know with Elementor, there are a couple of updates past, they went to where the Elementor wouldn't function on Bluehost because the memory limit was so low that it would throw you into safe mode every time you wanted to edit.
And that's where I misunderstood at first. I thought you said Divi. So Divi was the same thing, just notorious for like
Yeah.
being a resource hog.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so
Now I've moved on to what seems like a more serious question about blocks. I just basically have one page that we're talking about here with 6 blocks in it.
Yep.
Each block, I type in new, and then I type in TA for table.
Yep.
Table, click. I say 3 rows, 3 columns, 20 rows, whatever it is that the other guy had. So to have just 6 of them on a page, that's really bad.
No,
How often would you do?
it shouldn't.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh.
it shouldn't be. And the table block is actually, so the core table block is actually very simple. It's literally just an HTML table that it's creating. In fact, if you go
now it sounds like though he's typing HTML into the block.
No, I'm using a block called table.
yeah.
Okay.
So the
Yeah.
so the table block, you can add your columns, your rows, and then you can view the HTML that it's writing, and it's just straight HTML. There are other table plugins that you go create them in their own table area, and then you bring them in. But what you're talking about, if you're talking about 20 rows, 3
Yep.
columns, whatever, those are not big tables. You could put, there was tests done with hundreds and even thousands of blocks, and they work fine.
Yeah, okay.
But there can be reasons why in the editor itself you run into some problems. Hey, sometimes I run into it where it's like even other things I've got running in my browser will cause.
Yeah, that was the other one I was just going to say too. Depending on your browser tabs too, if your browser running out of memory, because
Restart your browser.
Huh. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Cool. The other little thing was it took me about 2 hours to learn how to put in a favicon or a site icon.
Yeah.
That's WordPress 6 point something or other. Oh my God! Even at learn.wordpress.org, they had a video on this. I replayed the video of that certain section over and over and over.
which theme? So you're using the vanilla 2023 theme?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so you can't custom. It doesn't go to a site identity thing anymore. They don't have that.
2023 is it's bare bones. I mean, you can definitely build sites with it. Your mileage may vary,
Okay, that's all, folks.
Yeah.
Thanks. This is my first time here. I'm not too far, about an hour west of you guys in New York State.
We're glad you're here.
Thanks for joining us.
This
Virgil.
is lovely what you're doing. I love it.
The more
Great.
questions, the better too. Although we talk a lot, but the more we can add.
And Ted, I'll look at that video on
Yeah.
favicons in the WordPress.org. If that's something that we need to update, I can talk to the person that did it. So
Yeah.
we always appreciate feedback on those.
So Laura, one of the things you were asking about this before, and why people might not be finding this stuff. Part of it, to me, always continues to be. So I love the people that learn and know them. Start working with them. Training was one of the teams that I was involved in early on. But recognizing, and why I'm very interested in the DIY side, that there are a lot of the things now that are so block theme based are talking to a lot of people who still aren't there because they're used to they are doing what they're doing, and it's different. And then as new things come on and don't recognize that, and in the classic theme you will see this, and it's all about the block theme, and forgetting that the majority of the people, and it is the vast majority from whatever numbers we can find, are using classic themes. So just so much of what's being shared, importantly so, it's great for new users. It's great for people who decide that they're going to dive into the block theme. But for folks who are just trying to find out, how do I put a favicon there? And, we might be used to, like, in our classic themes that have a good theme that has it built in, and you go to customizer site identity, click, done,
That's one of the problems with the whole site is the filtering and trying to find different things.
Yes.
And we're trying to, yeah, that's kind of one of the goals is the filtering of being able to put in the right wording to find stuff, and especially the older stuff. Hey, Ray, can you pull up your site again and go to the dashboard?
I was just going to go learn.
There's that too, but go to your regular dashboard of a site, when there's a window that pops up. Oh, maybe the updates.
Click on screen options.
Oops, hold on. Welcome.
Oh yeah, the welcome. Yeah, click on the welcome. So this is a nice place because of the fact that there's 3 different areas that you can click on to get more information.
It was turned off.
And then you also have learn about the 6.32 version that'll update soon for the 6.4 version. And just, adding those little things to make it easier to get to the wordpress.org site to find the tutorials, lesson plans, things like that.
Yeah, I always forget this is missing. Sorry, when you first install or when it gets updated, you usually get this nice welcome. It tells you everything. I always forget though, after I've installed it, I can always bring it back afterwards by clicking on that welcome.
Yeah.
I do notice that there was a little bit more effort put into, and I know I brought this up in some of the discussions about, the welcome screen on an update and it forgetting the fact that most of the people seeing that welcome screen are not using a block theme without it recognizing the fact. But I do this welcome screen here, for example, and I'm talking about the update, the big one. Sometimes it's a little very block theme centric and forgetting a little bit, but there's a dynamic element to this too. So this is recognizing that you're on a classic theme and it says start customizing. I believe if you're on a block theme, that'll be different because you're not going to a
There is
custom.
no customizer.
Yeah. So I have in experimentation, I have found some things are dynamic to a classic theme versus a block theme. I wish there was more of that. I wish there was even just writing in some of the welcome screens saying if you're on a block theme and for that type of thing. Again, all of those things that somebody gets to a point where they're like, they watch a tutorial, then they go to their site and they go, it doesn't look anything like that. And there's all the factors that we talk about that make that happen. Your theme, your plugins, it's like, well, if you're on that theme with those plugins, it looks like that. But if you're on this theme with these plugins, it doesn't look like that. And it's hard. It's a challenge. So the more we can get into the concepts behind things versus the exact go here and click on this, the better, because then it's like now you can start adapting, that's I think really important. And I think as much as we can, Laura, that recognizes even to say, and if you're on a classic theme, this doesn't apply, or go here or something to that effect.
Yeah.
Would help as opposed to not doing that. So that's my opinion.
Well, I know we're almost out of time, but like I said, hopefully this at least helped people get some ideas for different strategies for, again, we're not saying abandon page builders. I mean, that was the thing too, when Gutenberg first came out, there were all these headlines. Is this the end of page builders? Like, no, it's not, there's still definitely a place for them. I think, as we said, I think what we'd like people to think about a bit is don't always jump to a page builder necessarily, especially depending on the type of site. As Ted was saying, like for a site where maybe it's not something that's e-commerce, it's kind of a more simple brochure type site. If you're starting off brand new, consider building it with entirely blocks and a block friendly theme. Like I said, hopefully we gave you some ideas around that. I'll send out tomorrow sometime the link to the recording of tonight's session if you want to go back and watch anything. I'll also send out the link to the Hartford WP WordPress site that Peter put together. It has all of our slides in there. And again, we'd love to hear other folks' questions. I know tonight we kind of did a lot of demo stuff too, but if you're going through this process of moving away from a page builder to blocks, let us know. Reach out to us either directly or come to next month's meetup or through the private Facebook group as well too, because we're a helpful bunch. We definitely want to help everyone out, so you're not scared or intimidated by it. And I think the hybrid approach, to me, that's the best way. If you really want to try it out for the first time, that's the safest way to do it. Again,
And-
also
and
it's for
really-
locally too.
Yeah, real quick too, and Eagle put in some links to other things. Some of us can be found in many meetups, and there's
Yes.
a lot of great meetups across the country. If you go to meetup.com, you can search for WordPress. And one of the tricks that I do is I search for like Hartford, Connecticut, but I also search for somewhere on the West Coast, because you don't always see things, and look for the online ones. And if there's a topic that reaches everybody's been really friendly, really helpful. Some of the same faces that are here, that's some of those folks I met, and they've come over here. So
We cross-pollinate.
nice community of meetup people too.
Yes. So thank you.
There's a list of meetups right there.
Yeah.
Cool.
Beautiful.
Thank you, Eagle. Well, thanks everyone for joining. If you're here for the first time or you're returning, well, thanks for joining us. We hope to see you again next month. Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you. You're dears.
Good night.
Take care.
So much.
Bye.
This was